we're writing this book and have this initiative about rebranding Christianity, which it could make it seem like, oh, go with a bunch of branding consultants and let's come up with a brand and how are we going to, and that's not the deal. So Jesus gave us the brand 2,000 years ago. We don't have to make it up. He gave it to us. And there's different times, different places you could go, but I think the best expression of it is the Last Supper, where, he said, this is how people will know you're my disciples. Like this is how you'll roll. This is your legitimacy. This is your deal right here. And it's the new command. And the new command was to love one another the way I've loved you. Which, at first, the new command, you think, well, what's new about that? Love is all over the place in the Old Testament and all that. And that's not novel. Jesus talked about loving your enemies in the Sermon on the Mount. That's novel. But what's novel about love one another? And what's novel about it is the phrase, as I have loved you. And then later, he repeats it toward the end of the conversation. He said, this is how people will know you're my disciples, you love one another. There's no greater love than this, when a man lays down his life for his friends. And of course, in a matter of hours, they would see that happen as Jesus laid down his life for his friends. And so the brand is this radical kind of Jesus love that goes way beyond sensical. Like, who does that? Who would love like that? Who would lay down their life for the sake of somebody else so sacrificially? Who nobody loves like that. Who does that? And that the church his movement would be a movement of radical love that would be an irresistible force for good in the world that would win over a skeptical world. And that's the story of the early church. That's exactly what happened. And this little tiny group of people, Christianity should have been stamped out. One of the biggest mysteries of history is how Christianity survived, much less became the dominant force in the world in a fairly short time. But historians, secular historians and all that all agree it's essentially radical love displayed. The only diverse community that ever existed, the first one, as they loved people outside of themselves in ways that were beyond reason. They won over a skeptical Roman world. And that's the brand. The first thing people should think of in Gen Z when they think of Christians is, wow, they're crazy how they love people. Like, who does that? Who's that generous? Who's that open? Who's that inclusive? Who's that accepting? Who's that welcoming? That doesn't make any, who does that? And of course, we're known as the opposite of that. And, if you ask, and we have, if you look at these studies and they ask people in our culture and all generations, but certainly Gen Z, when you think of Christians, what do you think of? Well, you can imagine arrogant, pushy, judgmental, unkind, so on. The opposite of the brand, self-focused. And what happened? The most important brand in the world lost its way. How did that happen? And I think that's a complex thing, but one of the things you see in church history is whenever Christians move from a marginalized place to the center, it typically kills Christianity and the uniqueness of Christianity. And it becomes self-focused, it becomes about protecting our power, we just lose our way. And I think that's what's happened in American evangelicalism is when you've had that much influence, you want to protect it, and we want to take America back, or the Christian nationalism thing, and seeing this as a Christian nation that it's ours, and we've got to make sure people agree with us and legislate our morality, and that's never the Christian mission, and it's a distraction from the Christian mission, and it turns out that when you war against the people that you're supposed to be reaching instead of loving them, they don't appreciate it, and you have recoil, and that's what's happened, and so we've lost a culture because we've lost our brand. You talk about a brand promise, right? We've killed the brand promise, and it's ironic and unfortunate that we're known as the exact opposite of what Jesus said. This is how you roll. This is how people will know. And so we've got a lot of work to do.